I will start my speech 3, 2, 1. Panels, you know that in the current status, the political status is messed up. For example, in Indonesia, where the policies are made with so much controversy and scandals. However, we should not generalize the overall of the politicians because we know that the politicians are categorized into several categories. We know that there are some politicians who only work in the political party. Some of them are rolled into the parliaments and some of them are the executive. It means that a lot of things that are being decided by the government side of the house to be explained why at the end of the day the status quo is not that problematic, ladies and gentlemen. However, we know that this kind of competency test is not in line with the characteristic of the political candidate that we need because we know that we need some of the political candidates that can solve the problem directly in reality, not only by their through the test. We also know that if we are talking about the election, the problem is not only from the political staff but also from the election systems and from the citizen about whether or not they have the literacy capability to choose the best person or not be able to choose the best one. Because even in the status quo, we know that a lot of candidates are actually good, but they lost to someone who has actually won through money politics and other dirty stuff. First thing that we need to be proven in this debate. First, why at the end of the day test is not necessarily determine someone's worth. Before I go to my arguments, I have several rebuttals towards the government side of the house. First, they said in the current situation, distrust from the people towards the government is that big, but we believe that it also will happen on their side because distrust will always be there because we know that in the governmental distrust and distrust between the society towards the government is needed for the check and balance especially for the country that has a large area and the various citizens, just like in Indonesia, the interests of the people are various and not all of it can be solved by the government. Even in the past year, we know that some of the policies are good, some of the protests still happen anyway because it will be hard to satisfy all the people's needs. Second, they said the candidate should pass the test with the subject of social, economic, and law, but I believe that it will not necessarily make those candidates are better than the current political candidates because we know that some of the people who are good in the academic paper test, etc., does not mean that they are good in implemented in it in the real life or even in the policy that they will make later. Third, they also said that the political candidate must be expertise from their professional field, but I believe that is not exclusive in their mechanism because we know that some of the political candidates in the current status quo are already have their magister or even the doctoral degree, but still they call social democrats or they are not even particularly using their professionality in their decision making. Moreover, if they are planning Trump for the tariffs, we actually know that Trump has the best basic knowledge in business matter and it means that he's not that brilliant about economic and business things. But the thing that might be something that the government side of the house worries about is because the tariff policy changing that suddenly become high has no direct impact that might have been considered by Trump and his team itself. Fourth, the government side of the House also said about the current status quo where the vote for the election is decreasing and the mechanism will be a bigger option. But we believe that is not true because we know that the decreasing number of the voting is actually not only because of the candidate, but also the literacy of the society and how much they care about the governmental things that will happen in the next 5 years or other period of time. Five, this is also leading into their argument about on how in the current situation the policy that are made by the political candidate are making the people's lives more difficult. But I believe that it will also happen in their side of the house because of the practice of political things is not that simple and in parliaments are not consist only from one person but a lot of person that will discuss about the new policy and the previous policy and decide whether this policy will be better for their citizen or it will be worse and hard for them. The government side of the house also believes that the current status quo there are a lot of scandals and always seek attention. But we believe that is not exclusive because everybody see will not always satisfy everyone right. And scandal or attention seeking will still happen even though we use the government side of the house mechanism. That's why their argument failed. They also say that in the status quo, the political candidate that is being chosen is the candidate that has legacy. But we believe that yes, legacy is also needed because legacy is one of the parameters of a good leader. Because we know that all of those political candidates are not only smart by brain, but also socially smart. We will need someone that actually can answer the problem practically, not only theoretically. We are citizens need someone that can actually find the root of the office or in the parliamentary. Moreover, we need people who are not only knowledgeable in their fields, but also have a long experience in their fields. It is why the legacy is not something that is really bad, ladies and gentlemen. 8. The government side of the House also stated that the political party will be facilitated and sponsored by the country to increase the knowledge of the political candidates. But we believe that it will cost a lot for the country. Meanwhile, we know that, for example, in Indonesia, there are more than 100 of political parties, and it means that the money to run the election will be swelled up. Ninth, lastly, they state that their mechanism of using the test will create more participation, but we believe that participation is needed to see the characterization of each citizen. For example, in Indonesia, because there is still a lot of money politics and the bigger mentality is big, making the mechanism is by the government side of the house is not going to increase the participation level but decrease it. Now let's get to my argument why at the end of the day is not test is not necessarily determine someone's work. This happens because when the test is just being a formality thing. As far as we know, not all people do their test honestly, but part of them doing cheating things to get them through. For example, in many cases, we even heard about a jockey test or tax, and until now, such unfair acts have often not been followed up or discovered or even the jockey are protected by the parties behind them. An example again, the thing that we often meet that we call orang dalam, yeah, the party that manage and helps test participants to pass the test. Imagine that many participants test doing this and they still get away. So in the end, there will be many positions filled by irresponsible people or even who are not qualified. And moreover, the things that we need beside this way is how the people work in reality. Because eventually we need the person or people that can handle themselves, handle the struggle situation and many more. And such thing like that cannot be assessed not only through a test that needs a real observation how they truly respond and take action when in real field situation because that thing is more important just than just a test because ultimately in many situations or even with an appropriate attitude or response and not just through tests that are easily manipulated. Many people know the theory but not all people can do that truthfully. For example, all people know if cheating is a wrong action but in reality we often see this action maybe in our school workplace or maybe our government in these things like this often happen because most people only understand a theory but cannot apply it. At the end of the day, the test doesn't necessarily determine someone's work because the test does not show the attitude or skill of someone, and the test can be manipulated. And the test only measures the theory, not real behavior. That's why we firmly oppose this motion. Thank you.